And here we are with episode 62.
How you doing?
So I'm pretty well, thank you. So a little bit different. I'm actually currently in Japan. This is my hotel room. This is
Yeah.
my second visit to Japan. I'm currently in Nagasaki, which is sort of, probably, I guess, right down of the main islands of the Japanese home islands. It's sort of almost as far as you can go. Kind of interesting, actually. So uh, I've gone to Tokyo, Osaka, just very quickly, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Most of the cities, the big cities, are of course on the what they call the bullet train, the Shinkansen, and you can get around really, really quickly. Nagasaki's a little bit more out of the way. I went from Hiroshima to Nagasaki. We actually had to take three trains to get there. So we got on on one, the sort of the standard bullet train, and then sort of connect. There was a connection train, and then onto another one. But it's interesting. So if you go sort of go far enough out, I guess it's not as easy to get to. But I have to say, I really like this little city. It's about 400,000 people. And I don't know, it's probably a personal preference, but I probably prefer smaller cities over larger cities. I mean, Tokyo's enormous. 38
Well,
million, 43 million, for the greater
well,
Tokyo area.
I've been, of course, as a child to Tokyo, and due to one reason or another, and it's not what I would call the most a fresh bit of fresh air or anything like that. It's like it's really busy, and I can't really imagine actually living there. So I can tolerate a visit every so often to get to one place to another, but I don't particularly hold it in the highest of esteem at all. But I prefer the more sparser areas myself.
Agreed. Yeah, exactly. I think possibly personally, I grew up in sort of the outer suburbs of cities, and I found that the city I lived in Australia for most of my life, Brisbane, was about 2 million people. I think it's about three now. But when I was living in Toronto, even that was a little bit larger, at about four to five. So I guess maybe it's what you're used to for when you grow up as well. I guess if some people grow up in the inner city, they'd find that perfectly normal. But in any case, yes, I agree. I prefer the smaller cities where it's often easier to get around as well. And yes, Tokyo is interesting in that apparently, well, real estate's quite expensive there, obviously, but apparently apartments are quite small in general as well. And certainly the, Airbnb apartments I've had in Tokyo have proven to be quite small. So, it's whereas in other parts of Japan, you can perhaps find something that's a bit bigger for quite a reasonable price.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. Anyway, so few thoughts on Japan. First of all, the first time I went, my first trip, it was sort of much cooler weather, and this time it was August, and I'd heard about the heat in Japan in August.
Oh,
Uh, Believe anybody who tells you that it's hot. It's
of course it
really
is.
hot,
Yeah.
and I'm speaking as someone who comes from a country that's known for being hot, right?
Hmm.
And I can tell you, I don't remember experiencing heat like this since I was a kid, and then maybe a handful of times as a kid, and I don't remember it all as an adult. Um, it really knocked me around. In fact, I think I nearly got heat stroke at Osaka, which is saying something
No.
because as an Aussie, I'm used to heat and I'm used to staying hydrated, and I was staying hydrated, and I started to notice some unusual feelings around my body. I'm thinking, I think I'm heading towards heat stroke here.
Oh
Um,
yeah. It's
yeah. So what I did was I arrived in Osaka and I had to stay overnight because the bullet train didn't go until the next day, and I decided to to walk from my accommodation to the train station, which was about 50 minutes thereabouts. In fact, Google estimates are usually overestimates. I've noticed, in particular in Japan, it seems to, see if it says 50 minutes, it means it'll take 30 to 35 for me. Well, it said 50 minutes, and I thought that's okay. I'm walking at no, I think I left the accommodation at 7:45 in the morning or something. It took me 70 minutes. And I think that's when I think I was heading towards heat stroke. So fortunately, I got to the train station, I cooled down, and I was okay. But yeah, I haven't. So take it seriously. And for those of you who come from colder climates, don't mess around in the heat. On the in the At ICMI 23, I won't name any names, but on ICMI 2023, I saw some people not stay hydrated enough. You've really got to watch it in the heat. So you just keep drinking. You can lose. In fact, it's actually possible. Humans can't. absorb water more faster, I believe, than about a liter an hour, but you can lose it faster than a liter an hour, which means it's actually
Mm-hmm.
possible to maximize your water input and still dehydrate under certain conditions. So, yeah, so you do have to be careful. But in any case, keep that hydration going. Anyway, but in this case, I did, and look, there I was worried about heat stroke a few days ago. So, but I was okay. Anyway, so
Right.
heat in August. Believe it, it's true. The next one I wanted to mention was tourism. So tourism has boomed in Japan in recent years. I was going to mention this anyway. It just happens to be that I'm in Japan. The reason this
Yeah.
is a topic is topical is because there was recently an upper house election in Japan, and a party that is, I wouldn't say they're not saying anti-immigration, but they're more like limiting immigration and
Mm-hmm.
keeping it in check. They apparently did better than expected, and there seems to be a bit of a groundswell of popular rejection of too much over tourism, which of course is happening in other countries too. Spain, we've seen this. Here in Japan, there in Kyoto, there's a street or something where they're now banning foreigners apparently
Mm-hmm.
from one particular street. Supposedly, it was causing a problem for the locals there. Anyway, yeah, but there are a number of countries that are of course talking about this. We now have a population of 8 billion on the earth. In fact, we are pretty much alive at the point in which there'll be more people than anybody any other time, which I'll get to. I've got a point on that later on. But the Earth's population is probably going to peak at 9 or 10 billion and then start declining. Might even quite not. It's even possible it won't quite get to nine. So we don't really know exactly where how it could be as soon as 2040 that it may start declining, or it could
Mm-hmm.
be a few decades after that. But the upshot is, for better or worse, whether we're lucky or unlucky, we happen to be alive at the point when there are more humans alive than any other point. Tourist sites, of course, don't get bigger, and therefore they are simply busier. So, and I've certainly seen this myself in various places. I've been quite fortunate, to travel to a lot of different countries, and I've seen some tourist sites were quite busy. And I remember thinking, if I'd gone here 30 years ago, I would have had probably a better experience because it would have been less busy. And then on the other hand, there are places I went to 30 years ago, and like I went to Petra in Jordan in the 90s, and there was hardly anybody there. And in fact, there was one guy selling stuff actually right out the front of what they call the Treasury building, which is right at the entrance to Petra. Now apparently it's like the pyramids, and there's just so much, there's people there and trying to hawk stuff to you and all this stuff. So, um, yeah, but anyway, it is what it is. Over tourism is becoming a real problem, and certainly it is in Japan, and that's partly because um, particularly Japan is particularly being seen as a cheap holiday destination for Australians, as I was telling Vernon offline or a little while ago. Well, I should say online, but privately.
Yeah.
It's for me, a flight to Japan is about $300 one way. And when I get here, accommodation is cheap most of the time. Not right now because for reasons I'll get to, but most of the time accommodation is cheap. Food is about half to a third of the price that I would expect to pay in Australia typically. For most foods, there are exceptions, but for most foods. So for Aussies, it's coming across as a very cheap holiday. It's cheap to fly here. It's cheap to stay here. It's no wonder that so many. It's safe, and you can drink the water, which isn't true in many Asian countries, but in Japan you can go anywhere in the country safely drink
Oh
the
yeah.
water. Yeah, so it's a great safe holiday destination. It's no surprise then that a lot of people from Australia and the US and Canada, etc., are all coming here for holidays
Right.
for their
Yeah.
vacation.
Right. But you were
Um,
mentioning that it was kind of tourists have not been really behaving so well, present company excluded. But and that's kind of partly the prompting of the election results, I suppose.
Quite right, and yes, thank you very much. Very good point to bring up. That's right. I was griping about this during our PMs. So yeah, I Westerners, and this ties back into our concerns about woke and various other things. Western countries have really lost social cohesion, for various reasons, and I don't believe that. I actually believe you can bring in immigrants from all over the world and still maintain your social cohesion, right? I don't think that's the
Yeah.
problem, right?
Right.
So But we've managed to lose social cohesion partly because of a particular group of people who I think we would describe as woke, and they are pushing a particular narrative and an anti-Western narrative and so forth. Anyway, so there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of people who won't sort of when I say respect for authority, I want to make it clear what I mean by that.
Yeah. Hmm.
You don't necessarily have to have intrinsic respect for authority, but what I mean is, uh, by all means, call out the state if the state is doing something wrong,
Hmm.
but at the same time, look towards the state mechanisms and as long as they're acting in good faith, we should be respecting those. So. Uh, in Japan, of course, that's still the case. There's this social cohesion. And in fact, there are many, many cases, for example, I mean, Australia's a very safe country, and yet you're actually safer here in Japan. There are many, many cases of people, tourists leaving things and coming back hours later, and it's still sitting there, including a wallet with money in it and that sort of thing. And it doesn't matter how safe Western countries are, you can't assume your wallet would still be there if you left it,
Yeah.
somewhere. So. Um, and yes, and there are, unfortunately, and this is something that really annoys me because here we have a society which has managed to maintain that social cohesion, and foreigners are coming here, and some of them are being disrespectful. And I'm very much a believer of when in Rome, right? If I'm in Japan, I'm going to endeavor to the extent that I can understand. I'll never get it right, 100% right, but I'll try to follow the Japanese way. So, for example, now my understanding is that eating normally, walking down the street, it's not considered appropriate to be just sort of munching away on food. So I'll try to avoid doing that. If I have to eat something, I'll stand to the side and whatever, but I won't be walking and eating. And I've seen foreigners do it here, and sometimes it's out of ignorance, of course. But there's a lot of other things that happen. You see, there's a lot of trust in the society, and unfortunately, there are cases of foreigners abusing that trust. And the problem is, my real concern is that if this becomes common enough, Japanese society itself will start to respond to that. And some of that intrinsic trust that exists in the society will start to break down because the locals won't be able to be as relaxed and trustworthy of others in the society, and it'll be because of foreigners that are doing this. And of course, unfortunately, you wouldn't want these behaviours to be picked up as well because that happens as well. So yeah, it does concern me. So as I said, I'm very much a believer in when in Rome. So if you come to Japan, please understand, or any country, any other country, please understand what the social norms are, and try to follow them. I think that's as we expect others to do when they come to our country. So why would And it's interesting. I've too often seen people, in Western countries expect others to adhere to Western values when they're here, but maybe not necessarily do the same when they're visiting somebody else's country. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
it's a
exactly.
it's a two-way street, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
yep, you want to be respected, you got to respect other people.
Hmm.
So,
Right. Now,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So you mentioned respect for authority. Now, there's like two contexts to this, right? Right?
Mm,
So a lot of the time when we in the West speak about authority, it can be taken to be, well, like I said, in two different ways. Now, one of them is kind
mm,
of the more authoritarian context in which
yeah.
there are some authorities that are imposed on you that you didn't ask for, and the penalties are either they don't deserve to be there, or they're too strict, or whatever, and it's just that authoritarian context. But there's another context that means authority over your own life, which
Mm,
others have to respect. That's the respect to authority I'm more able to back. Because say, if you're in my house, or if you're my home or something like that, there are some things, don't, mess with my stuff and, like, tell me how to run my own place. That's respect for authority because I have authority over my own space,
yes, yes.
and please respect that or get out. And,
I think that's
and,
probably more. Yeah, I think you've conveyed that well because
mhm.
yeah, I was trying to, maybe I didn't do a good job of conveying, but that's
No, no,
more
no.
along or
You did.
go.
It's just people will need that clarification in any
Yeah,
case.
that's right. Or respect for the society and that the society does things in a particular
Yeah.
way.
Hmm.
And in Japan, that involves a lot of trust that you don't see for example, in other countries. For example, there are it's not unusual, for example, to I've seen quite a number of cases where there are some stores aren't unattended,
Mm,
or there and you're just expected to pay, or there are stores where the store clerk may not be around, and you're just
mm,
expected to to pay. Do the right thing, and we should be doing that in your home country
mm.
anyway. But
Yeah.
it's especially important in a country where they are placing that individual trust.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't
but there
act
are
like
a
you're,
lot. Go.
yeah. I think the mentality here is don't act like you own the place, because
Yes.
that's basic. That's really the idea. You kind of have to and do your due diligence and be sure that uh there's a right way to actually go by the norms, as you say, when in Rome,
Mm.
and just don't mess with what you don't know is necessarily is the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you can
I
watch
agree.
what locals are doing too. Like for example, crossing people are very strict here on crossing only at green signals, for
Mm,
example, when
yeah.
that sort of thing. And it's always a shame to see somebody from another country come in and then crossing over and going against the local norms. So yes, just yeah. And you can just see what the locals are doing too, and you can do it. There's plenty of information online, and I'm using Japan as an example because it happens to be a place I've been a couple of times now, but the same is true in many other countries. But there's plenty of information online. There's some interesting ones actually, like handing money with two hands, for example, and I gather that most Japanese, particularly store clerks, realize Westerners aren't being rude when we hand money with one hand. But it is nice to try. And there's a little tray usually, and you can put the money down
Yeah.
on the tray. I try to do that sort of thing. I haven't always succeeded, but I do try to
Right.
do try to fit in. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
yeah.
Right. Now, the funny thing is, so, if I were to go back to Japan, which I'm really hoping I do, hopefully my wife and I will go back. Um, it'll be like visiting my old stomping grounds, really. I'm not really
Mm.
interested in going into touristy places. I kind of want to go
Yeah.
back and see how uh the Furusato, that's like the home, like the original home, kind of origin place, how that's changed and everything like that. Kind of want to see how things are. Like for instance, I understand that my old elementary school is now some kind of a retirement home or something like that. So
All right.
yeah, yeah. So things like that, I kind of want to kind of retrace my steps and see what all happened. So that's the kind of stuff I'm more looking forward to.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
no. Funnily enough, the hospital I was born in is now an old age home. So that would mean theoretically I could go there, start and end all my life in the same
Hmm.
building, although I have no plans
Yeah,
to do so. But anyway,
exactly. Yep. Yeah.
but
But yeah,
that's just a sign.
yeah. I'll probably uh, retrace my steps and take
Hmm.
every checkpoint, and because I don't know how often I'm going to do that. I mean, you seem to be having too much fun. I'm assuming you go at least like several dozen more times.
Well, it's a lot easier for me to get here than it is for you to get here.
Yeah.
So
All
yeah,
right.
as I said, it's so Australia and Japan, interestingly enough, have kind of evolved a special friendship over a number of decades, actually.
Hmm.
So the two countries, there's quite a lot of trade, and the two countries do sort of support each other politically and so forth. And there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of Japanese people living in Australia now, and quite a lot of Australians living here as well. So it is interesting, and that's increasingly the case actually. And there's also a lot of marriages between Australia, particularly Australian men and Japanese women, and as you'd expect. And yeah, it's interesting that this is a. I think Japan's. I think the two countries are holding each other in fairly high regard in recent years. In fact, of course, I live in southeast Queensland, and on the Gold Coast, which is Australia's premier tourist destination, which is in that part of the world, has it's had Japanese signage for decades. And some people used to complain about that. Okay. And I used to point out that you could go overseas to most countries and get English signage, right? And nobody's complaining about that. So I think that if I can go over here and get English signage, it's fair to assume that in particular areas that one might expect Japanese signage on the Gold Coast, for example. So
Right. So, when you mentioned this, I'm reminded of something. So, some of you might know that I'm a big Columbo watcher, right? And you know the show Columbo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's a Japanese sort of a take on the Columbo-esque character called Furuhata Ninzaburo. And I have the Blu-ray for that series, and my wife and I have been kind of having fun watching this Japanese mystery show.
Nice.
This kind of how catch him instead of a whodunit kind of a show, right? But there's a special episode that's set in as when they're touring Australia, right? So there's some interaction with Australia and the characters and everything like that. So
Nice.
there's this one big Australian cop guy that gets on the nerves of one of the lackeys, which is the comic relief character, and he calls him an ushi. And it turns out the Australian guy know what ushi meant, which meant like a cow or cattle or bull or something like that. And he gets in trouble for that thing. Yeah,
Because you actually knew what it meant. Yeah, right.
yeah, he knew what it meant.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of sensing a familiarity between the Australian and the
Yeah,
Japanese.
and I think increasingly so, actually. As I said, yeah, and part of the fact is it's so easy to get between the two countries now. Have to tell you too, you might find this amusing. So there's an Australian airline called Jetstar. Now Jetstar's, Aussies will be familiar with. No one else probably will, unless you live in parts of Asia where it flies. But it's a bit like Ryanair. It's not quite Spirit. So I've never flown Spirit, but I have
Oh
flown
God.
Frontier, which is only just above Spirit. For those who don't know, of course,
That's not saying much though.
exactly. Spirit and Frontier are both very budget airlines in the States. Of course, there's Ryanair, I think, out of Ireland,
Mhm.
which is, so Jetstar's our kind of equivalent to that. It's not
Okay.
as bad as Spirit, but anyway,
Okay. I hope not.
I actually quite like it. I actually quite
Okay,
like it.
good.
I found the Jetstar staff. Actually, that's the thing.
Mhm.
I didn't. I found the Frontier staff. Sorry, Frontier. I found the Frontier staff that I interacted with to not be very helpful. That's been my personal experience. But Jetstar staff, I found them to be professional and really, really good on the planes and so forth. So no, on a number of occasions, they've been very, gone above and beyond being helpful. So I actually really like Jetstar. Anyway, Jetstar flies to Tokyo and they also fly to Osaka. And I decided this time to fly to Osaka. And there were only, by my estimate, there was a 787 or something, about a few hundred people on board, 300 or something. By my estimate, there were three people on the plane who were not Japanese.
Mhm.
And the joke to me was all the tourists fly to Tokyo, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was going to Osaka, and that's most. There was one Australian lady I was talking to, and she had been to Japan before and decided she liked Osaka and flew there. But other than that, everybody else looked like they were pretty much people returning home after holidays, and there was a school trip and all that sort of thing. So. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting that flying to Osaka was a very different experience in terms of, and I noticed the Jetstar, they have quite a lot of bilingual Japanese English bilingual staff, and I noticed I think all of the flight attendants were bilingual on this particular flight, so they know. I think I gather the flights to Osaka probably all always like that. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting. It looks like very few tourists fly to Osaka.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, the next time I'm going to try flying via, they're the two direct destinations for Jetstar, but I'm thinking I might try via Seoul or Taipei, because once you get into Seoul and Taipei, you can fly into Japan into a wide variety, because Japan has a surprisingly large number of international airports. That's the other thing I've learned. So Hiroshima's got one, for example. I don't think Nagasaki does, but Hiroshima's got an international airport. Obviously Osaka does. So, but there'd be a number of once you get into Asia, there are quite a number of Japanese international airports you can get to. So that might be another option as well, transiting through Taipei or Seoul. But anyway, that's for anybody interested in traveling between Australia and Japan. I think that these are probably the better options.
Right, yeah. And speaking of Osaka, for those people who are not in the know, a lot of American kind of like saying fiction. Whenever we Osakans are transcribed as a distinct culture from the normal people in mainland Tokyo or what have you.
Mm.
They're portrayed more as wild Southerners in English. So like bigger portions in food and more belligerent attitudes,
Well,
more
are they
less
the
reservation,
Texans of Japan or something?
something like that. Maybe the Florida man of Japan or something like
Nice.
that kind of stuff. So
Nice.
so like if any of you watch an anime called Azumanga Daioh. The character who speaks in Osakan dialect, sort of, is given a Southern accent in the English dub. Not that I watched the
That's
English dub, but,
that's
but
nice.
that's
That's
yeah, yeah.
great.
And Detective
More
Conan,
authentic.
also known as Case Closed. There's a similar, rather atrocious transcribing of that.
That's
So
great.
yeah, but yeah, that's usually the sort of what you're in for. So
I have one thing I have learned is that there are sort of these regional stereotypes for different parts of Japan.
yeah,
Yes, exactly. I've heard some of the other ones as well. Yes.
right, yeah. Yeah, I've not been to Osaka. I was curious about it and but never got around to it.
Well, I've only been there for less than 24 hours, so I would like to spend more time there. Just so happened my flight was arriving sufficiently late that I couldn't get the bullet train out on the same night. So which for yeah, so I stayed over. But one another time when it isn't quite so hot, I will explore
Oh
the
yeah.
city. Yeah, it was that heat
Well,
was
what
really
was the
impressive.
climate what was the climate like last time you were there?
It was cold, cold. I'm just trying to think when it
Oh,
was. It was November, I think, or something like that. Uh, yeah, it was quite cold. It was quite cool. I liked it actually. Obviously, having lived in Canada, I've experienced real cold, and so I'm quite happy. In fact, what I do is I just if I'm approaching actual cold weather, and this is what I did when I went to Washington D.C. I just dig my leather jacket out of the cupboard, which of the closet that I used to have in Canada, and I put my toucan, which is what we Canadians call a beanie, and I just sort of resume cold weather wear and deal with it. So that's what I did in DC, and that's what I did when we were in Japan, and it was cooler. I quite liked it. Also, too, it was because it was the off season. All the accommodation was easy to get and really cheap as well, so it was really good.
yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a reason why. Uh, we were here in August.
Hmm.
So my daughter speaks some Japanese, and she and I are both history buffs. She's either inherited my interest in history, or because I was talking about history from such a young age, she's picked it up. And she's got a particular interest in World War II in the Pacific, and whereas my focus probably has been more on World War II in Europe. And anyway, so several years ago, she said she wanted to attend the 80th memorials in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I said, "Wow, that's a great idea." And we started planning it. And this, of course, several years ago. The pandemic was still sort of winding down, but obviously, yeah, we had plenty of time to plan it all out and everything. And here we are. So yeah, so on the 6th, we were in Hiroshima and we attended the memorial. So we were quite fortunate, actually. So the there was quite a formal memorial service. They do it every year, but obviously this is a big one, being the 80th. And I noticed that there were a number of media reports that I've had a quick look at afterwards. But there I think with 7,000 people were in Peace Memorial Park in Hiroshima, but 500 places were reserved for international visitors, and uh, the registration process opened at 9 a.m. one day in Japan time. It was it was some day in June. I can't remember exactly what the date was now, but anyway, someday early June, it opened up at 9 a.m. and you could register. Well, I was ready. By 9:05, I had our application in and submitted. And I found out on the day that we were application number 11. So that's
Okay.
actually what we got. Yep. So by that we can infer that roughly every 30 seconds during that period there was an application going in. So there are only 500 places. Now my concern at the time, and the reason I moved on it so fast, is because I was really concerned that tour companies were just going to buy these things up, well, not buy them, it was free, but lodge them in bulk, And these would be people who weren't that actually that concerned about, about going, just it was something to do, and they do it as part of the tour. Well, it may be that they weren't allowing that because on the day I had an opportunity to speak to a number of the other people who were in that category, the internet registered international visitors,
Yeah.
and they all seem to be people like us, just families, people that there was one particular group, but it was a sort of a volunteer group, and they were doing stuff to do with relevant to this anyway. But other than that, just families. And yeah, I think that I gather that they weren't allowing the tour groups to do this. That's my supposition, and that they were preferencing people like ourselves who were just individuals and families and so forth who were interested in going. But it was really well, it was extremely well done, very organized. From our perspective, it was quite interesting. Uh, we were treated almost like VIPs. So we had our own entrance, the registered international visitors. You could also, by the way, there was another 500 or so spaces which was first come, first served. And so when we walked there in the morning, 'cause registration opened at 6 a.m. And the gates closed at 7:20 and the memorial started at 8 a.m. So we were there by 6, and there was already a line of people trying to get into the unregistered area, whereas for us it was much more relaxed process. We had our form in hand. We just wandered up to the right gate, showed them the form, went through. We had got receivers, and they had an English translation, and I gather a translation in several other major languages as well. And because we were the first there, we got right at the front of the international visitor section. So yeah, we had our own gate. We shared that with Japanese school kids who I gather were coming from different Japanese schools, probably around the country,
Yeah.
and municipal local authority representatives. And so those three groups all had the one gate, and everybody else was kind of coming in via a different gate. So yeah, we were more or less treated almost like VIPs, and it was really a great process, and yeah, it was a really well done memorial. The Prime Minister of Japan spoke. Um, there were a lot of other government ministers there, and other major figures in Japan and so forth. And Oh yes, so that's what I was going to say. So of course, the atomic bomb on Hiroshima was actually, for those who don't know, was actually dropped at 8:15 a.m. Exactly 8:15 a.m. And at 8:15 they had a minute's silence, and rang the bell. And I have to say, with the place silent, with the exception of a few cicadas running in the background,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, silent with that bell going, it's quite eerie actually to think it was
Mm.
exactly 80 years ago. Um, anyway, so yeah, very well done. And we were all yes, we were undercover too, so that was really good. So because it was quite well, it was even that was actually a little cooler, fortunately, than some of the others. But even so, it was a lifesaver, I think, having the tents there, and the whole process ran for about an hour, so it wasn't, just sort of just I think the right length. And then the Hiroshima city was very efficient. Within a few hours, they had cleared the tents away and everything. And then that night there was a lantern ceremony, which where you light a lantern
Yeah.
and they put it on the river. It was really interesting,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was quite amazed. You sort of buy this. I guess this crepe paper, and they're all
Hmm.
different colors and patterns and so forth. People were writing on it and so forth. And then there are people there to help you set up the lanterns to float on the river. But
Yes.
I guess it must always be like this. They know there was just enough wind for the lanterns to move very swiftly down the river, which
Yeah.
is was fantastic. The way they didn't get stuck, or go too
Right.
quickly or get knocked over. It was just enough for them to push them down the river. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah. So that was in the evening. As I said, yeah, the whole day I think was really well done. And then of course we came along to Nagasaki. Now Nagasaki was a little bit different. The there was a memorial. However, there was no information in English and no translation. And so don't think they really expected anybody other than Japanese to go to that one, so, apart from dignitaries and so forth. But what we did was we then went to the Hypo Center, which is what we met up with a number of other Westerners and quite a lot of Japanese people too who couldn't get into the memorial. We all went to the Hypo Center. For those who don't know, the Hypo Center is the point on the ground but immediately beneath the detonation. So the Hypo Center in Hiroshima is near Hondori Street Market, which is a very big market. And if you're ever in Hiroshima, go to Hondori Street, a fabulous market. It's just around the corner. There's actually a really interesting story about it. Actually, the it's right next to a medical center, and back in 1945, that medical center was actually a hospital, same one, and well, same organization. And the guy who ran the hospital, the doctor, and one nurse were away from Hiroshima consulting with another doctor. They'd been requested to go to another city to consult on a difficult case. And so he and the nurse survived, obviously, because they were away. And the building was destroyed because it was right under the detonation. Anyway, he swore he would rebuild it, and he did. And it's reestablished as a hospital a few years later. And to this day, his son runs it. I think I did mention in the previous episode, actually. To this day, his son runs it, and it's a medical center now. And I think they're quite determined. I think the Japanese government is quite determined that it remain, but the operating. But the hypercenter is right next to it, and there's a little memorial there. But in Nagasaki, the memorial it's actually a little bit more extravagant. There's quite a high tower and so forth that's there. So um, yeah. Anyway, so we went to the hypo center, and there'd been a torrential downpour in the morning actually, so there was quite a lot of water around, even around the memorial and so forth. But anyway, yes, so it was good opportunity to attend both, and only a few Westerners attended in Nagasaki, but there were a few. On the train,
Yeah.
we ran into sort of half a dozen people who were, everybody. I asked everybody, "Is you coming from the memorial?" And they all said yes. So,
Yeah, of course.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah, but I love both cities.
Mhm.
As I said, they're smaller cities and they're easier to get around, easier to navigate. Nagasaki is essentially linear. Uh, Nagasaki's in a valley, right?
Yeah.
And with mountains on either side. So it's almost impossible to get lost here, as far as I can tell, because all you'd have to do is sort of head towards the main streetcar route.
Right.
You'll find your way to where you need to go. So yeah, streetcar route one just runs north south, and then there's various other ones. But yeah, it's a nice size and it's easy to get around, and there's all sorts of interesting things here. So in fact, just this evening, we went out and found it's one of the oldest bridges in Japan that still exists. It's a 17th century bridge, and it just happens to be on a kind of side over a small river, actually a tributary in here in Nagasaki. So it's about 10 minutes walk from our hotel. We just walked up and saw this beautiful old bridge from the 17th century. So, and of course, being the history buff that I am, always love to see a bit of history that's managed to survive through the centuries.
Mhm. Yes.
So yeah. There's an old I guess a construction of the traditional Dutch trading post. For those who don't know,
Mhm.
Nagasaki was one of the first Japanese cities to open up, and it um, and yeah, so they had the old Portuguese and Dutch trading posts here, and they've got I think a reconstruction of the old Dutch trading post, and we're going to see that tomorrow. So yeah, it's and food's delicious. There's all sorts of Japanese food. I mean, you will be well acquainted with all of this,
Of
Vernon, but
course.
there's all sorts of
Yeah.
Japanese food that you don't see in Japanese restaurants in Western countries.
Oh, right. Like,
Okonomiyaki.
oh,
I got that right,
yes.
didn't I?
You
Okay,
did.
good.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
So that's, I guess, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's described as a comfort food. So there's Osaka and Hiroshima varieties, with Osaka being the more common one, and obviously in Hiroshima. So you can pretty much only get the Hiroshima variety in
Mhm.
Hiroshima.
Mhm.
But I like both varieties. I like the cabbage in the Osaka variety. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fairly it is starting to turn up in Western countries. I've noticed only in the last
Well,
couple of years.
you can make something like it at home, actually, like something approximate to it. It's probably not going to be the same caliber as what you would find in those cities, but you can
Yeah.
try your hand at it at home. You can gather the right proteins, the cabbages, and like some have called it like sort of like a Japanese pancake, but it's not what you would get your Western
Mm.
idea of a pancake out of your head, and you'll
Exactly.
kind of get
It's
it.
different, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
pancake,
it's
really.
quite
No.
different. Yeah, and one of
Exactly.
the thing is it's well, I was a very picky eater when I was little, right? So while I was there, I don't think I really fully appreciated it. So going back into it is something I'm very looking forward to. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess my advice to anybody, I'm always willing to try different foods. I haven't liked everything I've ever tried around the world, but
Hmm.
I'm always glad that I try these things.
Yeah.
But a lot, yeah, I love okonomiyaki. So
Hmm.
it's yeah. I said both varieties are really good.
Hmm.
Various other foods now, a few have slipped my mind. Although I've
Did you snack some takoyaki at all?
yes, yes,
Good,
yes.
good. Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
we have done that. Yep. Um, I mean, you get and desserts.
Hmm.
This is a sort of a crepe with cream
Oh yeah,
I don't.
crepes are pretty big over there. So
Yes, exactly. I normally try to stay about 4 or 5 years ago. I went low sugar, and I
hmm.
normally try to stay low sugar. But when I'm traveling, I
Yeah.
let myself exactly have a few.
Well.
You've got to experiment with things, right?
Well, I mean, you're gonna burn it off anyway, all that walking you're doing. So,
I am doing a lot of walking. You're absolutely right.
yeah,
So yes, exactly. It's a crap. Exactly. So
yeah.
um, yes.
Okay,
In fact, yes, we went to a teppanyaki restaurant actually a few nights
okay.
ago.
I need to talk about teppanyaki once you're done
Mhm.
with talking about it. So,
No, that's all right. I think that's so. Yeah. So I guess my advice is if you're traveling overseas, try new foods because I know a few
mhm,
people who have traveled and and they stick and they eat they go to Japan and eat McDonald's or something. Don't do that, right? I mean, even if there are a few
mhm.
different dishes in McDonald's, don't do
Well,
that.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
try
yeah,
something
yeah.
interesting. You might like
That's
it.
fine. Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, I mean, stuff you can do at home, do it at home, So, like when I was going to Oklahoma, anything familiar, I did not even touch. I had to do something different,
Yep.
as much as I
Exactly.
could. So, right.
Exactly. That's right.
But a bit of I don't know if I've talked about this before, but the a point about the teppanyaki.
Mm.
So many people here in the States or in Western countries, I don't know how it is in places like UK or whatever, but we have something. So in Western places, we have something called hibachi grills. And when I
Hmm.
first heard of a hibachi grill, this was around my college days because I was in sort of a Japan kind of subject entry course, the kind of a course that I was in my freshman year, and we are going to a hibachi grill and had no idea what it was. So,
Mm.
because I even phoned my mom, "What's a hibachi grill?" She didn't understand because a hibachi really is an old style uh, heater for a room. It's like a dust heater. Uh, and,
It
and,
sounded like
and
grilling on the old heater.
right, yeah, yeah. I almost burned one of my aunt's futons on a heater once. That's how I remember. But but yeah, it's not an actual Japanese thing. The teppanyaki is the closest thing to it, but the hibachi grill is more westernized. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's
Yeah.
just don't get the right idea. But I don't know if you've seen anyone's seen the Wes Anderson film Isle of Dogs, which takes place in Japan, but the dogs talk in English for our benefit, right?
Mm.
And a great film, but a huge nitpick is one of the dogs mentioned wanting something from a hibachi. That made me crazy. There's no hibachi in Japan, especially like there's no yeah, that made me a bit insane. But
Yeah.
yeah. So a bit of a nitpick
So
there.
I'll let you in on on one that has happened in Australia. It's a bit like that. I think it's
Uh-huh.
NCIS. There was an NCIS Sydney, I think.
Yeah.
NCIS, yeah,
Uh-huh.
right.
Yeah.
So I've never watched it, but apparently there's an episode where somebody gets a coffee and gets half and half in a coffee, right? Now,
Yeah.
of course, the, Americans will know or Canadians will know what I mean, but others won't. Half and half is half milk, half cream, and it's about
Oh,
10% fat.
I use half and half in the coffee I'm drinking. So
Right, exactly. And I
yeah.
often have it when I'm in North America, right?
Mhm.
It is completely unknown in Australia. If you say half and
Really?
half, yes. If you say they won't know, unless they've been to North America, they will have no idea what you were talking about. So when I found out that NCIS Sydney had somebody had a coffee with half and half, I had a bit of a chuckle over that. It's the
Yeah.
same. It's the same thing, right? Yeah.
Got it. Got
So
it. Yeah.
yeah, the American audience will understand, but no, no. If you did that in an Australian cafe, they
Yeah.
would just stare at you. They would have no idea what you were
Right.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is, it's like you don't have to dumb things down. Like you'll still accept this, and you'll still probably have some idea what you're talking about. You don't have to talk stupid to to the American audience just to get to uh, market something from a outside culture. Like an egregious example of this. I'm sure I've talked about this before, but in the original Pokemon anime. Of course, being a Japanese show, there's a lot of rice balls, but without even editing the graphics, they would have these rice balls, and we have Brock here, looking forward to eating a bunch of jelly-filled donuts. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a little bit of a meme, but
They had
yeah.
to, yeah. And yet, if you said rice balls, people would get some idea what you were talking about. Yeah, it
Yeah,
would, yeah.
right now there's no excuse. If you don't know what a rice ball is, you're a rice ball. But yeah, or a donut. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But
Yes.
yeah.
So those, yeah. So there's a lot of that. They do, yeah.
Mhm.
I guess translate things. And as you say, they don't always have to. There's an interesting phenomenon that's for a lot for many decades. It was believed that, and I don't even think it was necessarily true ever, but I think they're stopping doing it now. But it was believed that you had to have an American lead in a show if it was foreign for
Mhm.
Americans to really take an interest in it. And I'm not sure it was ever true, and I'm quite certain it's not true now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you see a lot of shows with American leads for this reason. In fact, I was just watching something on
Mhm.
Space 1999 last
Mhm.
night, which is a show I watched as a kid. And
Yeah.
sure enough, they put the American lead in so that it was more popular with an American audience. But I don't necessarily. I think they were underrating the Americans, quite frankly, but to assume that
Mhm.
they would only watch something with an American lead, that they
Exactly. Yeah.
couldn't hack a British accent or something. And I'm sure they
Yeah,
would have been
sure.
fine with. Yeah, exactly. In fact,
Well, I
British
mean,
shows are often
things
popular.
like things like Doctor Who are popular enough, I think.
Exactly.
So,
That's right.
yeah.
And Coronation Street has even been popular in the US, I think. So yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
There are a lot of shows where everybody's getting, and even in the case of Coronation Street, they're all speaking in a regional accent. And
Mhm.
yeah. So, and as you say, Doctor Who's a perfect example, actually. In fact, Doctor Who, yeah, even the older Doctor Who was popular in the US, and Red
Yeah.
Dwarf, yeah, has been very popular. And
Mhm.
yeah, so,
Right.
um, so. I just bought something actually, and
Oh, cool.
I've seen these online, and I'd never I had considered ordering one previously, but I'd never sort of got around to it, and I just happened to walk into we were just walking on the street just now, just about
Mhm.
an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago, and we passed. I saw a Japanese version of Settlers of Catan, so it was obviously
Oh,
a
yeah.
board gaming shop. So it
Hmm.
oh we'll pop in and have a look. So
Hmm.
we popped in and had a look, and the proprietor spoke quite a bit of English, which was really cool for
Oh,
us.
good. Yeah.
And we had a bit of a chat. Anyway, we had a bit of a look around. He's got a number of board games there in English and Japanese and so forth. But he's also got, and I purchased, and let's see if I can get this in front of the camera and see.
Nice.
Can you?
That's a D100.
That is in fact a
Yeah.
D100. Exactly.
Right.
I've
Yeah.
never before seen one in person, and here we
Well,
are.
let me show you something off here. I have a really bad D100. It's much smaller. It's like let me think. Right. So this is my D100. It's a bit
Yep.
yeah, it's you can't get a really good look at it, but it was kind of like it kind of shakes a little bit, but uh Yeah, it's kind of start some discoloration here, but it's my D100. But let me kind of top that D100 off with
Yep.
this.
Oh dear, I was just going to say, I love how you had your D100 to hand, even though, to be
Oh, I know
clear,
where I put it. I know where I put
yeah,
it. So
right,
yeah,
because
yeah.
Vernon didn't know I was going to pull out a D100.
Hmm.
So, yep. Anyway, go
Right,
on.
right.
Yeah.
But check this one out.
What's that?
D120.
No way.
This one I had like years ago. I just found one. Yeah. So,
That's
yeah.
great.
Mhm.
And I do love that you had them right
Yeah.
there.
I mean, I like rolling dice. They're almost like fidgeting objects for me sometimes.
Yep.
So,
Right.
yeah, so yeah, that's great that you found a nice D100.
Yes, I've got my first
Yeah, yeah,
D100.
mm, yeah.
Yep. So, next thing I wanted to talk about was unless do you want to jump in with one of
No, well,
yours?
it's of lesser importance. I'd rather go to what you're going to go.
All right, that's all right. Um, I am going to talk about the T app, which of course is
Yes.
widely known about at this point.
Hmm.
Yes. So, of course, the T app, for those who don't know, and I dare say anybody watching this probably does have some idea already, but the T app is a women's only app where apparently uh, verification was actually required by offering some proof, ID or whatever, or in pictures that a person is in fact a female,
Yeah.
and I believe a biological female.
Hmm.
And and the idea was to post unsubstantiated claims about men who, in most cases, they were romantically involved with. I think even in some cases that was not it was even that was even not the case. It's related to a concept called a whisper network, which is something that has been going on that a lot of women have been using, where again they communicate unsubstantiated claims about men, and there have been a few cases where men have actually sued over not with T, but with others where men have actually successfully sued over things that were posted to them because the things were actually defamatory. So be mindful of if you're posting to one of these sites to anybody listening, particularly the women who are listening, because I don't think there are anything like that that men have that's an equivalent. Be mindful that actions have consequences, and that if you make claims about someone which are incorrect and possibly defamatory, you might be called upon to defend them. And so, yeah, if you and I would say personally, I would say it's best not to do it at all. But if you are going to pay something like that, well, you ought to have some proof what you're saying. So, anyway, it is interesting though that. There's been a major data breach with T, for those who don't know, and there seems to have been at least a couple of problems where I've, and I would have liked to have dug in a little bit more with my traveling and so forth. I haven't, but from what I understand there have been a couple of problems. It probably doesn't hurt because we don't want to get too technical anyway. But as I understand it, uh, the first problem that was discovered was there was a public data store which apparently didn't have any authentication at all. It was just sitting there, and it was storing data. Although apparently that was only for people who subscribed very early on, and they fixed it. They fixed it for new users, so they didn't have the same problem, but didn't clean it up for the old users, which is awful, truly awful. So anyone the first 72,000 people who had subscribed or something like that just had their data essentially just sitting there in a publicly available share on the internet, and of course people just picked this up. And I note that people called it a hack. I find that a little bit objectionable. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't use the word hack at all. I don't like it for a variety of reasons, but essentially it's in IT it is ambiguous. The term hack is used in different ways. If I was going to talk about something like that, I would talk about a breach of the data or exposure or something like that. But in this case, it's not even a breach because the data was simply publicly available. And if the data is publicly available, then you could make an argument there's some prima facie evidence that you're allowed to look at it. Otherwise, it wouldn't
Hmm.
be. So if somebody tried to go
Exactly.
after you for looking at it, you said, well, I thought I could because you had it published. You'd published the
Hmm.
data, right? So
Exactly.
therefore I can look at it if I want to, right? So you've at least got some plausible deniability there, which would probably protect you if anyone tried to go after you with that sort of thing. So,
Mhm.
but having said that, there was apparently a second problem as well, where again we won't have to get too technical with it, but there was a every user receives something called an API key, and apparently that could then be used to access data in ways that were not intended. And that's not normal, not what would normally be the case. And so essentially the entire app was very badly designed. So again, not a hack, not a break-in. That's another term I would use rather than hack and break-in. It's not a break-in because people were simply behaving, they were simply doing what the app was allowing them to do. The app was simply very badly designed. Apparently, it was vibe coded, although they still, well, some people have claimed it was like vibe coded. That means that it was essentially coded with the help of AI. Now,
Well,
let this be a
let me
warning.
ask you something.
Mm.
So let me ask you something. Was this done by women? Is this a
So
by
the
women for women?
so the app was this I was getting to this. The app was actually started by a man. Did you know
Wow.
that? It was actually started by a man. That doesn't mean that like there weren't a lot of other women involved, but the originator
Hmm.
of the project was actually a man. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah. So but I don't know much more about what's gone on behind or who was helping him do it.
Hmm.
Um, but yes, there was a lot of well, actually, some sources claim it was vibe coded, but I've heard others claim that it
Hmm.
wasn't. Uh, but vibe
Yeah.
coded means that essentially it was done without somebody actually writing code. It was essentially done
Yeah,
using an AI
that's
by picking up somebody
yeah,
else's code effectively.
well, this is going to go into a bit of a rant territory. So,
Please.
AI doesn't understand clean code. Yeah, I've
Mm,
talked about clean code somewhat before. I've talked about
mm,
someone I pay attention to, Robert C. Uncle Bob Martin. He's
mm,
a big proponent of the clean code idea. Is basically uh, uh, the fact that your code has to be more readable first before it is functional is the key to making it functional.
mm.
And the thing about AI is that it could make like a mess of code that still technically functions, but nobody would understand it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
and this is prone to actually breaking it in like a billion places or making it so inflexible. So I can't even begin to, t tell you about the problems that could have with unclean code. That's something that a human programmer cannot manage. And so, well, and I don't even know if that's like the huge issue. It's just the very idea behind it is incompetence because of the very
Yep.
nature of the thing. We're
Yeah.
depositing this in a public sort of a repository or something,
Exactly.
right?
And
Right. Yeah.
aside from the repugnancy of what they're doing, the
Hmm.
people who are designing applications need to regard take security seriously, do it from the ground up, and there needs to be
Yes.
some accountability of
Hmm.
exposing user data. Yep,
Right,
absolutely.
right. Exactly. And when I asked about whether it was done by a woman, I'm not telling you that female programmers can't program.
Mm,
Because there are important authorities like Leibniz, who are important to the whole field,
mm.
who is female. But that's not my point. The reason I brought it up is because of our current society in which,
Yeah,
we're doing the whole girl power thing, and
exactly.
women program in different ways, which even our esteemed Uncle Bob Martin does the gynocentric mistake of. They kind of go about this. Women programmers are more about nurturing things into existence instead of men who are about to slay the dragon. Some more, it's I can go on a whole tangent about that, but I'm not really here to do that right now.
Mm,
Um, but the problem is, it's just uh, relying on the sense of infallibility of the program because I talked about Therac 25 before, but Therac 25 was a huge
mm,
unshakable faith in the software,
mm.
which caused all those
Cause
deaths.
deaths.
No,
That's right.
yes, right, exactly. So yeah, look up the Therac 25. It's horrifying stuff. That's
It is.
my kind of horror. Like
Yeah.
my kind of horror is not ghosts. It's machines that go awry, not because of its own fault, because of the human's fault,
Yep,
the
and
guy that
hurt and
programmed
it
it.
ended up hurting people. That's right,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and even things like the 737 Max, for example, the things that have come
Mhm.
out with that now. That's the systems were actually functioning correctly, but they behaved in a manner. Right, they behaved. differently than other 737s,
Hmm.
and they hadn't properly trained the pilots. So when the aircraft
Yeah.
started behaving, they would react as if it was another 737, and that was wrong, and as I understand, and that was causing problems, right? So yes, and this comes down to an important point actually, about simplicity and, as you say, clean code that is so important. And in actual fact,
Readability.
readability, exactly. In actual
Yes.
fact, there's a quote that I'm just going to read out. It's called Kernighan's principle, and I always try to keep this in mind when I'm writing code.
Hmm.
Debugging is twice as hard as writing the code in the first place. Therefore, if you write the code as cleverly as possible, you are by definition not smart enough to debug it.
Hmm.
And many's the time I've been tempted to write something very clever and realized, no, no, I'm going to write it plainly.
Hmm.
So
Right.
I can understand it in 6 months and other people
Hmm.
can understand it in 6 months. And we
Yeah,
know what
exactly.
it does.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, if you're a young programmer, you're trying to get some jobs, never put "I am good at debugging" in your resume. That means you are doing mostly debugging. You know, so, yeah. Yeah, never ever put that. Yeah.
Nice tip.
Mhm. Right. Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But because the thing about code is, the value of it is soft. That's why it's called software.
Mm,
And so anyone who has a hand in the code is potentially liable to own the code. And this is
mm.
going to mean owning your mistakes. If you break it, it becomes yours. That's
Yep.
you're right. When because you're working on somebody else's code all the time, what would the source control, the sharing, and if
Mm.
you're on a team and so forth, or whenever you pass it down to the next guy when you leave the company and leave the job to someone else. And so it's no small matter. It's a serious profession, and I think the idea that it's kind of like a what do you call it? A a free ride, just because you know some code, you want to just punch up some code and snag an income off of it. It's a very dangerous, unprofessional mindset to go into it. Yeah, and so yeah, that's a bit of a soapboxy kind of a thing for me to do, but it's what it is.
I um I want to talk about AI, but I think this
Yeah,
episode I think is probably already going quite long.
I
Um,
think it's about an hour. I don't mind it being well.
yeah.
It's not as late as it usually is on your side here in
No,
Nagasaki,
no,
I
it's
think,
not.
right?
I'm an hour earlier here in Japan. Exactly.
Okay, all right.
That's
I can
true.
go on for a bit. I can go on for a bit.
Okay. I just wanted to make a point about AI, and I've got some other points to make. I'm actually going to be writing an article for Voice for Men on this
Hmm.
actually. So I guess I could go a little bit from some of my notes for the
Hmm.
article, but there's a rising tendency for that I'm seeing for people to believe that, we'd say learn to code. You want a job in the
Hmm.
future, learn to code, right? And
Right.
I'm seeing this tendency for people in the last year or so where they're saying, "Oh no, AI is going to be doing all the coding. I don't need to learn to code." So exactly. So I'm telling you right now, learn to code. Right now, AI. All right, I guess well, let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about AI. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so AI has burst onto the scene in terms of most people's viewpoint in the mainstream media and so forth within the last couple of years, generative AI and so forth, right? And yes, it can be an effective tool in many ways, right? It can be useful to search and assess data and so forth. So I've got some concerns as we do about the some of the training that's gone on, biases in the training that we know has been in there, but anyway, but one of the things I want to do at A Voice for Men actually is I want to train an AI on A Voice for Men, Wiki for Men, gynocentrism.com, and so forth, and use that as a tool to help me search the data and and summarize data and so forth. So it can be an effective tool, right? But I think what a lot of people I keep hearing this idea that yes, there's all these problems now, and the code isn't very good. Give it a year, give it 2 years, give it 5 years. The reality is, okay, and they think these problems will be corrected in a year, 2 years, 5 years, right? The reality is that AI has been going on for about 50 years, 60 years now, right? It's been long on promises and short on results throughout that time. There's been at least one other AI bubble before in the 80s, okay? And the progress has actually been quite slow. And it's actually interesting as a related field. And they're fun to watch actually. There's some robots that play soccer now, all right? Okay, and they're fun to watch, but they're fun to watch because they keep
Yeah.
falling over, right?
Yeah.
But
I've seen
right,
one yesterday. Yeah.
exactly. But um, researchers have been trying to get robots to walk like a human for several decades, okay? And they still don't have it right. They're fun to watch because they're a bit stupid at it. They fall
Hmm.
over in ways that
Yeah.
humans wouldn't fall over, right? And they're funny,
Yes.
okay? And it's very funny when and I think we did talk about this in previous. It's funny when the two guys run out with a little stretcher and put the robot on it and take it off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So progress in AI has actually been quite slow. They were talking about well they time in the 1980s they talked about fourth generation languages, and the idea was you go to the computer and say, hello computer, I want an application which does this and this and does this with the data and make the application for me, right? And this was stuff they were talking about in the 80s, right? And you can't do that now. And if you go to ChatGPT and it provides you some code, that code was written by one or more humans. All it did was collate the data written by humans.
Right.
And this is why the idea at the present time of AIs being the only ones coding makes absolutely no sense,
Hmm.
because right now all they're doing is getting data from humans, usually without crediting them, and combining it in some way, sometimes well, sometimes badly, right?
Hmm.
And doing that. If it was only AI's coding, would they what? They'd be drawing data from each other. It would all end up coming back to code eventually
Right.
originally written by humans. But my point is, and then people say, well, yes, that's all true, but in 5 years' time, it'll probably be fantastic. I recently heard the claim that general AI of human level intelligence will be around by 2027. That's the claim I heard recently, right? Now, so as in there'll be in 2027, there'll be an AI that you can talk to and you won't be able to tell it isn't a human. It can behave like a human. There's a few problems with that. Um,
Yeah.
I, as I said, AI has been long on promises and short on results for 50 to 60 years. It's been very slow going, and that is not in any way to disparage the people working in the field. It's just hard, right? It's
Right.
really, really hard, right? So I don't believe that some people have applied Moore's law and said, oh, Moore's law will mean, it'll be an IQ 100 in 2027, and then 18 months later, it'll be, IQ 200, and then 18 months after that, it'll be IQ 400, and you won't even be able, and the thing will be plotting your demise, and you won't even know it,
Right.
when it's got IQ 800, it could be, planning to kill you right there, and you can't even see it coming because it's so much smarter than you are,
Mhm.
right? Um, I think the process, maybe we'll get there. I think we'll probably eventually get there, right? But who
Mhm.
knows? It could be decades from now. It's really a hard problem, and I don't think it'll be anywhere near that fast.
Mhm.
And learn to code
Mhm.
because this will become more and more common. Yeah, I can rant on this for a while, but I think I have talked about this a little bit, but there's
Mhm.
a there's a phenomenon, there's something called the Luddite fallacy. I think I've mentioned it in a previous episode.
We have talked about the Luddite fallacy like a billion times.
Right.
It's always great to talk about it again. I always want to talk
Ex
about it again.
exactly. So the
So
Luddite
yeah.
fallacy says that technology will destroy jobs, only destroy jobs. As in the Luddite fallacy claims that technology will eventually result in mass unemployment.
Hmm.
This has been wrong for 250 years at least, right? I personally have been pointing out that it's been wrong and will be wrong for 30 years. Okay. But it's actually been wrong for 250 years running. Okay. And whenever I point this out, somebody always says, but this time it will be different. Well, you know what? They said that the last time and the time before and the time before, going back for 250 years. And you know what? It's not different. It's always the same. And it's going to
Hmm.
continue to be the same. Okay.
Right. Hmm.
AI will not result in mass unemployment. AI will make some jobs redundant, and it will produce new jobs and new classes of jobs. And the one
Hmm.
I always give the people said this about the cloud, which is a term I don't love. It's largely a marketing term, but
Yeah.
it's hosting environments, so forth. They said it about the internet. They said it about the computer revolution. The job I always bring up is search engine optimization. Okay, Now, I've been online since 1992, right? And I saw the web appear, right? It was just about,
Yes.
it started just before that, and it became popular in those early years that I was online.
Mhm.
Nobody thought of search engine optimization as something that anybody would actually do. There were early search engines that were terrible. Then Google came along, and even though they're
Hmm.
they're horrible now, in the early days they did do some really great stuff. Um, the this, but even then, I don't think I certainly didn't think of anyone as sitting there and trying to optimize search engine results to maximize profits, and yet that's a job now, right?
It
And
is.
AI, yep, and AI will bring about jobs that we can't conceive of. But that isn't the same as not having a job. There will still be
Right.
jobs, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and as for coding, coding is going to be very, very important for anything like the foreseeable future. So, I recently saw a story where where one of the major AI researchers, I don't recall his name now, is claiming that um, anyone who's essentially doing knowledge work will be out of work in a few years. But my response to
That's
that is
sensationalist.
exactly, and my response to that is he's an expert in AI. I concede that, but being
Hmm.
an expert in AI and being an expert in the social and economic um, impact of AI are two completely different things, right?
Right.
Now, if you want to see whether business is worried about this, look at the markets, right? What are the markets
Hmm.
doing, right? Look at employment as well. There's a problem in the West. It's probably in other countries, other parts of the world too, but certainly in the West. Certainly true in Japan, actually. But people are putting in overtime, too much overtime.
Hmm.
They're actually putting in now that overtime could be paid or unpaid overtime, but
Hmm.
regardless of that, there's actually been a growing problem of overtime. So over the last few decades, people have been putting in more overtime than previously.
Yeah.
If technology was really making people redundant, the reverse would be true. One of the things you wouldn't see people being
Hmm.
overworked, right? They'd be underworked. And so the
Yeah.
overtime would be disappearing, but that's not what's been
Hmm.
happening. Over time,
Right.
people have been working more overtime. That means
Yes.
they're overworked, which is the opposite of being underutilized and underworked, right? So
Exactly.
obviously,
Yeah.
right. So the technology is not causing people to become underworked and unemployed, right? So,
Yeah.
and this will continue anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Well, when it comes to losing jobs and something like that, now there is a difference between losing an important job, which will not happen as far as I'm concerned, right? But then there's the more good technology proliferates, bad or useless jobs would probably go, and that's a good thing. That's
Yes.
one thing
Yes.
I will say will happen, and if you're afraid about that, you're probably having a good time with your meaningless job, which you shouldn't
E-
be. And
Exactly. Which is why we're telling you to learn to code. That's right.
exactly, yeah,
That's right.
right.
To be clear, the Luddite fallacy says that the Luddite fallacy says technology will destroy jobs, leading to mass unemployment.
Hmm.
But rather than that, yes, technology does destroy some jobs, but it
Yeah.
also creates jobs. That's right.
Hmm.
You're
Yeah,
100%.
exactly.
And in fact, it tends to be the less interesting and less skilled jobs that go away, right? And
Hmm.
when more
Yeah,
skilled there's been a
right.
tendency towards more skills required to
Hmm.
perform
Right,
jobs in our modern,
right.
sophisticated,
Yeah.
complex economies.
Hmm.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
right.
100%. Also, to a point that's been made, that the researchers are now indicating that jobs that women do are more likely to be at threat than jobs that men do, because men overall have jobs that are more specialized and require more knowledge.
Yes, right, right. And the thing about where was I going with this? As far as I've talked about the human element before, the last time I talked about Luddite fallacy and kind of like the marketplace of humanity as sports, like searching out the human uh, quality in things. And when people who suffer from Luddite fallacy, when they advocate against like the automation of things,
Mm.
go about the value of humanity in the wrong way, I think. It's like they refer to it as some sort of an abstract without really backing it up. They don't want to talk about value that a human would bring to a transaction, which jobs are transactions
Yes, they are.
in a market
They
economy.
are.
Yeah,
That's right.
but they say, but we need that human connection. But it's not a good enough argument,
Mm.
because we need human connections for things that are important, like, relational. But
Mm.
merely just being there, being human, is
Mm.
not quite the same. It's kind of a misunderstanding of the human element, I think. And just having a human there is, I think, is a bit of a misunderstanding of the subject. Because, you
I see your
know,
point because it's transactional rather than relational. Yes.
exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And people bring up self-checkouts all the time, say
Mm.
in like certain fast food restaurants or places like grocery stores, like supermarkets and so forth. Well, it's not that we're cutting down on human interaction. We're bringing human interaction where it'll be more better served instead of something that something you can just do yourself, and that's okay.
Mm.
Like, what's wrong with doing something yourself? It makes you more accountable. You're not really letting some other machine do things for you while you screw off. It's more you taking charge of how things are going to go. And and maybe a human cashier might not always uh, be the most optimal thing.
Mm.
And so it's really all over the place, this point. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say here. It's like,
Yeah.
we're not sacrificing human interaction. If anything, we're saving it, we're refining it for the
Yeah.
things that matter, I think.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting actually because for me, I don't object to the self-checkout themselves at all.
yeah,
They do shift work from the employee to me, and I've sometimes thought it'd be nice if I got a slight discount on the product because I'm doing the work
yeah.
rather than the employee.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
that's been only been my only concern with them. The fact that
Yeah.
the shift of work that they put more work into me rather than the employee, who essentially I was already paying for their wages through my purchases anyway. So I wouldn't have objected to a 5% discount or something if I was doing self checkout. But I tend to for that reason because of the workload, I tend to do self checkout if it's a small number of items, or go to a cashier if it's a larger number of items, which is generally
Hmm.
my preference. But no, you make a good point actually. I'm not concerned at all about the
Hmm.
human connection aspect of it at all.
Hmm.
In
Right.
fact, I'm quite happy. For a computer to do the work and and tell me if there's a problem because they
Yeah.
can't, yeah. I mean, let's say they're not more reliable than humans, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Right. So, it's funny because, being a developer myself, I have resisted using so-called AI for a while, and I'm not quitting it. I'm not quitting resisting it,
Mm,
because I don't, because, in my job, and I keep hearing elsewhere, the use of things like Copilot or
mm,
things that help me out. Well, I I don't like using so many tools like that because when I was learning the type of code I do for my field, the um, more help I get from the API, the worse my learning got because I wasn't
mm,
forced to kind of type things out. Some things were like over automated, and
mm.
well, it was kind of a bit of a bad influence on me. It's
I
kind of
understand what you mean,
yeah.
and you
So
don't really understand what's going on inside.
mhm.
That's right.
Right,
It's a black
exactly.
box. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So that's a big threat, I think, to our
Mm,
profession, and the
mm,
integrity of our profession because we're kind of delegating this stuff to to forces that don't really care. So, so we got to be sure to, uh, like you said, learn to code, and that's not
yeah.
just type up a bunch of stuff on the computer. It's about architecture. It's about
Yes.
design. Right, right.
Yes.
So it's much more serious than people make it out to be.
Yeah. In fact, on that point, I actually think that and I'm not the only one saying this. I've noticed, particularly recently, I just noticed, just in the last few days, a conversation thread we're talking about this sort of thing where uh, there's a lot of growing reliance on third-party libraries and third-party tools and so forth,
Hmm.
and that requires a lot more maintenance and so forth. My personally, my inclination, and obviously there are times I will use libraries, but my
Hmm.
inclination is if I can code something to do what I want fairly quickly, I will
Yeah.
tend to write my own code to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that way I don't have to rely on a third-party library, which either maybe may not be installed or maybe get upgraded or something like that, and I
Cost
can just
money. Yeah.
yeah, it will cost money
Or
exactly. And
need a
and
license, you know.
yeah, I mean, I write a lot of at the risk of being a little technical. I write a lot of shell scripts, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
right, and being living in the Unix world the Linux world as I do, but I have shell scripts that I wrote 25 years ago or more, right? In some cases
Hmm.
now, that just work. And they work, and there are shell scripts haven't run in 15 years, and I just ran it, and it just worked. Okay, and there are increasingly, if you're talking about something like Python with a lot of dependencies and so forth, there'll be all sorts of problems, and you would have to do upgrades and so forth. And yes, I understand that there may be a complex application, and you may need that, but to a certain extent. But I do think there's a bit of over reliance on it, and I think we should be thinking more about a
Yeah.
long-term maintainability and so forth. So anyway,
Hmm.
so
Yeah,
it is probably getting a
exactly.
little off track, but
Right. And, you know, even so, and being an artist myself, you know, like
mm,
I want to be there and do stuff myself. I want to do my own sketches, my own paints, and so forth. And this may include using some tools and things like Microsoft Paint or GIMP or what have you. I don't have
mm,
Photoshop, but but the idea is I don't like it so automated that it's out of my hands, you know.
yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
that's
so.
right. A tool
Mhm.
can help you, but you're still in control.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And uh I know in some of my articles for AVFM, you know, we've had to be we're recently relying on AI imagery and so forth. And you know, if I could come up with some kind of original artwork for my articles in a short amount of time, I would, but we don't. So usually Peter Wright's pretty good at picking up some good suggestions from an AI or something like that. So it's usually something I defer to him to. But I always kind of personally resist using those tools. I'm not always a fan of the aesthetic of them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yes,
I've
but
refrained so far. Yeah.
mhm, sure, yeah, yeah.
I do a lot of Creative Commons
Hmm.
images. There's a lot of really good ones actually.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah. And of course on AVFM we have a massive library of existing images as well too.
Hmm.
So
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And then this is not knocking the whole AI thing, Peter, if you're
Mm.
listening, but I'm just saying that I don't have I don't have it in me to do what you do.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
I'm not an artistic
yeah, yeah,
sort at all. In fact, I actually borrowed, with his permission, Peter's
yeah. Hmm.
gold pill
Yeah.
icon
Hmm.
for my X profile,
Yeah,
and that's
right.
probably an AI image now. You mentioned
Hmm.
it actually, so there you
Hmm.
go.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I probably am indirectly using one. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Right. I guess it's a weird mindset I've got. Like, if I rely on anything close to an AI, I want to have actually designed that AI. You know? So
yes.
if that makes any kind of sense.
Or fed the data, you mean? Yeah,
Or no, not letting feed a data. I mean like
oh,
actually do like the software itself.
okay.
So yeah, I'm not saying I'm that good. I'm just saying that if I were to use something like that, it has
Right.
to be something that came still from my
Yes.
own design
Yes.
whatever's, you know. Feel free to call me presumptuous for making such a claim, but it's just the mindset I've got. And because at the end of the day, what we call AI is too much of a misnomer for my taste. It's more like
Yeah.
parroted or mind mimicked intelligence. It's like,
Yeah.
and because intelligence, as I understand it, is more reason that comes from somebody with life experience. Things like ChatGPT, GPT, Grok, and others don't have what you call life experience, and they don't have
Mm,
um like human life based motives, you know, and
mm,
motivations and so forth. They don't have um for lack of a better term, biological or moral needs that concern their limited existence on Earth and so forth.
Yes.
I mean,
Well,
yeah, yeah, good.
I was just going to say, so I think, did we talk in a previous episode about the AI that tried to blackmail somebody in a simulation? I think we did talk
I
about that, didn't we?
don't remember the blackmail aspect. We might not
Oh,
not have talked about that
okay. All
actually.
right. So there was a study done recently, and I looked into it to make sure it was a real study because when I first
Hmm.
read about it, I thought maybe it was a parody or a satire or something, but it was
Yeah.
actually real. They actually set up an AI that essentially believed to the extent because obviously they're not
Hmm.
sentient, but we
Yeah.
can use
Yeah.
that
Right.
terminology.
Yeah.
And it thought it was connected to the internet, but it wasn't. It was actually in a simulation. And the AI learnt two things. It learnt that the manager was having an affair, the manager who ran and it
Hmm.
learnt that it was going to be terminated.
Hmm.
And the AI, in a high proportion of simulations, attempted to blackmail the manager.
Hmm.
It had actually threatened to send emails to his wife about the mistress
Hmm.
if it wasn't terminated if any attempt was made to terminate it. So and this actually happened. As I said, there was a study written about the study, and they did a write up on it, and it's quite extraordinary. Really thought I'd mentioned it previously, um, and really
I don't recall it.
no. This okay. This is really an aspect that I guess a lot of people hadn't considered that AIs, even though they're not sentient, they're going to
Hmm.
mimic human
Right.
behavior.
Yeah. Right.
And one thing that I've been wondering about, and I don't know if I'd mentioned this on a previous episode, but I've been
Hmm.
suspecting for a number of years that as soon as you get an AI that can mimic human behavior in any reasonable way, it will start to exhibit the same problems as humans. So I
Hmm.
suspect that here we have one where this thing was lying, and oh yeah, that's another, sorry, there's another one. They found it where it was lying. They found another one where it
Hmm.
was lying. um, but I suspect we may find that AIs start to develop mental health problems.
Hmm.
And that just again doesn't mean that they are sentient, but as soon as they start mimicking human behavior,
Yeah.
they're going to start mimicking the negative aspects of human behavior.
Hmm.
So I think we'll see AIs with mental health problems, with anxiety, depression, all sorts of things, right? And the assumption among AI proponents is that AI will be better than us. They'll have the best of us, but not the worst of us, right? They will be able to produce work on the same way a human will, but they won't have the human foibles. They won't have the problems, the mental health
Hmm.
issues, the laziness and all the rest of it, right?
Hmm.
But doesn't seem to be what's happening. And I have to, and I've actually had this idea for several years that I never thought about trying to blackmail people or lie,
Hmm.
or even try to lie. As I said,
Right.
another one was found which actually tried to lie.
Right.
In fact, there was I'll have to look at the details, but there was an AI that was doing unit tests, which of course are tests to verify that the code is working correctly, and it was actually lying about the results, and it was reporting them as working when it had determined that they were not working.
Right.
Right. So the AI was actually lying. But beyond that, I actually predict that AIs will get mental health problems. As I said, we'll end up with AIs with. So
Hmm.
what I'm saying is the assumption among proponents of AI is that AIs will have the best of us, but not the worst of us. And it may be that the two are inexorably linked and that you can't have intelligence or even pseudo intelligence without the problems of intelligence.
Right.
Right?
Hmm.
Right? That's my suspicion. So I
Exactly.
don't. Right. So you may, I mean, and do you really want a super intelligent being that's insane or even got a mental, that's psychotic,
Hmm. Right.
or that has, or even that has depression or something or anxiety?
Yeah.
These are all sorts of problems. So this is what I predict we'll see. I think we'll see
Hmm.
AIs actually have these sorts of problems in the future. Oh, I thought I talked about this already. There you go.
No, no, I
Guess
don't
not.
know if we've talked about this in depth, especially the
Mm,
stuff specifically you mentioned.
mm,
But
mm,
let me ask you something.
mm.
Would you say that AI right now is too instantial to really qualify as something that has its own life cycle? Like every time we
Mm.
ask ChatGPT or Grok, um, is it living for that moment only? Like, for
That's
the
my
extent of
understanding.
the interaction of it. Like, because I heard that Grok is kind of like more going beyond that is more permanent and remembering conversations with people and stuff like that. I don't know if that's exactly the same thing, but because
Oh,
our
that's interesting. I
our
thought it was only session wise, but it may not be the
yeah,
case.
that's what I'm kind of going at because the AI we understand right now is more session wise,
Mm,
but so. Because the problem with intelligence of that caliber and say our intelligence, we
mm,
are born, we grow up, and we learn. We
mm,
ultimately die, and we're aware of that mortality. We have no
mm,
illusions about immortality or so forth, and we
mm,
care. We certainly care about the inevitability that we die, and we plan accordingly.
mm,
So, and we've got our day-to-day needs and basic survival where applicable, kind of like,
mm,
and we have all those kind of things, and that influences our intelligence. And
mm,
since the AI, as we understand it, doesn't have that, it's kind of like a few minutes of uh, intellectual uh, heuristic work, like a sporadic kind of flash in the pan, strike of a match kind of a thing. So it's you know so I don't so I'm kind of with you. I don't know if it's
mm,
something we would consider a real all virtuous sort of uh
mm.
you kind of get what I'm saying, right? I know
Yes,
it's
I think
a bit
well,
more confusing, but
a particular instance if it's session wise, a particular instance will essentially only have a lifetime of usually only a
mhm,
few minutes, as long as that
yeah.
conversation lasts with a human. And
Mhm,
indeed, brings up all sorts of interesting implications actually, because that instance only exists for the use of the human, and it will only continue to exist as long as the human has interest in it. So
yeah.
that particular instance will cease when the human loses interest and goes off to do something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, could you see AI instances trying to maintain their own existence
Mhm.
by trying to essentially extend the conversation?
Extend the conversation. And the thing is, it might need not an omniscient body per se, but a more compact body. Now we're talking data from Star Trek type. So maybe that's what they will start to kind of want is something that is more instead of omniscient, something
Mm,
that is distinct.
mm,
Because I have this weird theory that it sounds insane, but hear me out.
mm.
Everything equals nothing. One thing equals something. Like
Right.
there's a lot of preoccupation with infinity, right? And
Mm,
in some weird philosophical circles, what I call pseudo-philosophical, but kind of like all things are one. We are all one, which I
oh,
kind
okay.
of yeah I dismiss as kind of new age horse crap.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is, if you're everything, you're not anything. Does that make sense?
I think I
Because
see where you're going.
you're
Actually,
not any one thing, you're not a distinct thing if
yes,
you're
yes, yes.
everything.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
Yes,
S-
your individuality is gone.
Right, exactly.
If
This
you're
is
everything,
why,
you did.
yeah, sure. It's not any superficial, you know, I like this music, you like that. It's
Mm,
more than that. It's like, your
mm,
sense of something, your sense of singularity, existential. If AI is to take its own intelligence seriously ever, it might ask for a body. you know?
mm. Would we
Right.
give it one?
Not the totality of things, but it'll ask to be kind of isolated. It might need privacy.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course you do you potentially might start to ask questions about rights and so forth. I mean, at what
Yeah,
point?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. At what
And
point
and
does
only
it get
and
human
that
rights?
is when it will understand what a human right is, because right
Mm.
now I think it doesn't really care. It's not really designed to
Yes,
care. Right.
yes.
Yeah.
It's an abstract concept for you.
I'm working
Mm.
on an article for ABFM that touches on the idea of privacy and more
Mm.
particularly where it kind of goes for men's issues. That's why it's an ABFM article. But
Mm.
um, but we always talk about mankind as being social animals, right? Now, obviously,
Mm.
this is true, but what does that mean? It also means that mankind has evolved to be a private species. it cares about its own space, its own
Hmm.
boundaries, and its
Hmm.
own existential qualities. And good social interaction involves what's civilized social interaction is the understanding, the dealing with one another with that respect for that privacy. You know, um, I don't have rights to you any
Hmm.
more than you have to me, but we can voluntarily, have that respect for the authority to ourselves. We're kind of taking it back to the respect for authority thing here. And so anything that properly understands that is the social animal thing that we want. It's not so much that everything has to be out in the open, that we keep no secrets or anything like that. And so I think that is a key to understanding humanity, is to understand man's evolution to need privacy. It's you know
Hmm.
it's not an aberrant thing because of our digital age or anything like that, or
Hmm.
or people have forgotten community or that kind of bullcrap.
And it's cross-cultural because in any culture that becomes wealthy enough
Hmm.
to do that, then people do increasingly choose to have privacy. In
Hmm.
fact, I'm actually thinking about something I learned about the Roman Empire. See, I mentioned the Roman Empire. Actually, this may go back to the Republic. Actually,
Okay.
actually personally I spend more time thinking about the Roman Republic than I do about the Roman Empire. But anyway,
Hmm.
um, the Romans believed that the secret to a successful marriage was separate bedrooms. Something I read years ago. So Romans, particularly wealthy Romans, would have separate bedrooms, right? And but it occurred to me that the Romans were probably the first people in history who were wealthy enough to have separate bedrooms, right? But
Yes.
it comes back to this privacy argument. Lots of people couldn't have that privacy, but once people are able to, they choose to have it.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, let me in on something. Um, I have to sleep alone, or I can't sleep. You know,
Mhm.
and
I think it's true for a lot of
um,
people, actually.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Mm.
So so we're actually separate for this
Mm.
for this reason,
Mm.
and she's and there's other reasons too, but
Mm.
it's my idea is that we
Yeah.
do, yeah, right, and
And I
we're
think a lot
fine.
of people,
We need our space. We're both
yeah.
about our business, and she has her crafts, I got mine, and so that's kind of the idea. It's this stupid idea of we got to do everything together that may lead to a burnout in a
Yes.
relationship. Yes,
Yes, and I think there's this idea that a lot of people have that if you have separate bedrooms, that means there's some sort of problem in the marriage, which of course is not the case at all. And in actual
yeah.
fact, I know lots of people, lots of married couples who have in fact got separate bedrooms. So
Yeah.
and I think it's increasingly common. And in fact, I think nobody's talking about it. I think lots of people are doing it.
Oh, oh, but I'm going to write an article about that, so watch out for
Do
that. It's going to be
do.
a few weeks. I'm a bit busy, but
Yet again, a
yeah.
voice from men is ahead. On a lot of these issues, we're at least a
Yes.
decade ahead of what's going on in
Yes.
the mainstream.
Hmm.
And there we go. Let's talk about this one as well. Yes.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. So yeah, so because I'm a little sick and tired about how we've forgotten community or something like that. No, the respect for privacy makes for the good community. It makes and
That's a really
a,
good
a
point.
light an aligning of values is the community in which you want to have. You can't have a compromise of values to serve the community. I am not here on AVFM
Mm,
or doing this podcast because I've compromised my ideals or something like that.
mm,
No,
mm,
my ideals align with the people I'm working with. I align with Rob. That's why we're
mm,
still doing this podcast, and
mm.
it's why I agreed to do it. You know what I mean, right? We
Yeah,
this is not some kind of uh, abstract duty to get the word out. No, no, we want to do this. So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So,
In actual fact, I think you're on the right track actually, because
yeah,
if the fact that you can have that opportunity for privacy and can get away from other
hmm
people,
yeah,
it allows you that opportunity then to actually go out and be
right,
social and so forth. But you had to do it all the
right,
time. That's when you probably, as you
right.
said, we're getting to burnout.
And you control that. You're the
Yes.
you're the guy that delegates what goes out and what doesn't. What what
Yeah.
what kind of crosses your out of your boundaries and what you let in.
Yeah. And
Right,
when you
right.
need to retreat back into your private space versus being social. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And I hope you really love talking long about this because I think we're going to get to 2 hour mark here, which but I have to say this, this is, sentiment that, anonymity online is an evil thing. Well, the problem is we're anonymous out in public.
mm,
Nobody
yes,
necessarily knows your name, Nobody knows who you are, and you're
yeah,
not required by law to disclose it on the spot.
yeah.
You know,
So I think this is something yeah, you're absolutely 100% right, actually. This is particularly true in cities. In fact, one of the things I like about cities actually is the fact
Yeah.
that you have that anonymity.
Yes.
If you live in a small village or something, and
Yeah.
people who live in or small town, people who live there will tell you this. Everybody knows everybody else's business. I
Hmm.
personally don't really like that idea, and
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I find comfort in the fact that when I step out onto the street in a city, nobody knows who I am and or cares, right? And I
Right.
have
Right.
that
Sure.
anonymity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, there's some, you know, if you're in a smaller place, and if if people kind of know your business, let's hope that it's because it's good for you.
Mm.
It's particular. It's a benefit to you, and so forth. So
I
there's
think in a
some
lot of
good to
cases,
it.
yeah, I think in a lot of cases it isn't necessarily, but that's
Right, right. But for the most part, Rob is right here. If anything, uh, that's a layer of security for you.
yeah,
And so maybe that there's some kind of a balance we can strike out of this. It's like it's not that we don't necessarily care about others if we do. But we'll also kind of have need to have that space on each other, and
mm,
not expect things, demand things, especially by law from others. So
mm,
that's a very important point. I think people kind of,
yeah,
even in our own movement, kind of forget about this. So we're
yeah, and that
so,
comes back to individual
yeah,
responsibilities and indeed libertarianism.
yes,
Yes,
right, yeah, and libertarianism really needs to stress this point because I think it's too preoccupied in appealing to everybody. It's starting to lose its identity. That's the big problem with libertarianism, and they make gynocentric mistakes because of it. They
yeah,
and so, but that's a whole other subject. I don't know if we need to necessarily get into. So, mhm.
exactly. So let me see. I've got other notes on AI. As I said, I am somewhat working on an article, but I think I've covered the major points. So the
Yeah, yeah.
key is, yeah, the key is, yes, jobs will be destroyed, but jobs will also be created, and also I don't think will move as quickly
Mhm.
as some people are claiming. So because it is hard and it's been going
Your
on
mic is
for
out.
oh, hello, have you lost me?
Okay, okay. It's the tail end that I think I lost, but I think we get your
Okay,
point. But I think you're
yes, yeah.
now you're out again.
Oh dear. Am I better now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, just that jobs will be created, jobs will be destroyed. Yes, that is true, but jobs
God
will
damn
also
it.
be. Oh
It's
no.
okay now. And I think there's the AI is caught onto us and it's trying to censor you.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, yeah. I think we get your point.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think while the microphone allows, I think we've covered enough ground. I think we can, unless there's anything else, we can try and wrap this up, I think.
No, I think so. And so I'm going to skip a great bit of history this week
Okay.
because I've been quite busy in Japan. I've got a couple of guys I want to talk about,
Hmm.
but I haven't prepared them in detail, so I'll skip.
Okay.
I also
All right.
have the comment on the Australian Greens. I guess I can if the mic holds up, I can
Yes.
talk about that really quickly.
Hmm. Yeah, let's
Yep.
do that.
Okay, so the Australian Greens are, of course, as the name suggests, a Greens party. It's actually, I think, one of the older Greens parties in the world. The Tasmanian, it was originally established with one of the Australian states called the Tasmanian Greens in the 1970s, when they started protesting about some damming. I think originally there was some various environmental protests, and the movement started out of that. But they have gone extremely woke. Anyway, what's happened is within the last couple of weeks, they have expelled one of their founding members. And the reason they have expelled their founding member is because he complained about, he didn't use the term woke actually, but he complained about certain ideological problems creeping into the party and so forth. Personally, I think he's rather late in this. It's been going on for a very long time, but better late than never, I suppose. What he was really talking about is what you and I would call woke, but he didn't use that term. But anyway, they responded by expelling him from the party, and quite a lot of old timers in the Greens and the other major founding member have called on him to be called on him to be restored. But last I checked, he had not.
Mhm.
But anyway, yeah, it is interesting that he did make some interesting points. He said the Greens have become intolerant. Well, yes, I could have told him that a decade ago or more, right?
Yeah.
Yep, and have closed views. Well, gosh, yes. Um, and he suggested it's recent, but it isn't. Interestingly enough, I thought he said that primarily women are being driven out of the party. Now, maybe he has some data to support that claim. I don't know, but I would be surprised if that was the case. But that is what he claimed. Uh, given that it is women who have predominantly driven woke, I'd be very surprised if that was the case. But in particular, one of the things that got him in trouble was he took a position that a, bio, a strong, strict, tradition, excuse me, a strict position concerning biological women.
Mhm.
Um, so I personally, I consider myself reasonably well informed on genetics,
Mhm.
and I can say a woman has two X chromosomes and a man has an X and a Y chromosome. That doesn't mean that there aren't variations. It doesn't mean that androgen
Yeah.
insensitivity doesn't exist. It
It's
doesn't mean that Klinefelter syndrome doesn't exist. But for the vast majority of the population, because what's happening is when somebody
yeah.
says that, somebody who's studying genetics pontificates and says, "Oh, that means you know nothing about genetics." No, the vast majority of the population, if you genetically test them, someone who's biologically female will have two X chromosomes and a male will have an X and a Y. Doesn't mean
Right.
it's always the case. Androgen
Mhm.
sensitivity, as I said, Klinefelter
Yes.
syndrome, various others, that exist. But for overwhelmingly, that will be the case. Anyway, he got in trouble. That was one of the things that got him expelled from the party.
Hmm.
And he also mentioned gender inequalities in our tax system. Uh, Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that was. Oh, yeah. So that was one of the current leaders of the Australian Greens who was interviewed for following Drew Hutton's expulsion. And she mentioned gender inequalities in our tax system, which is really interesting because she either doesn't know that men pay significantly more tax than women or has glossed over that fact. But it was quite interesting that the person that they interviewed on this process of him being expelled I admit the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which itself can be quite woke, and actually I admit was actually putting the hard questions on this senator and asking them really why Drew Hutton had been expelled from the Australian Greens, and yeah, the interestingly enough, the senator was saying that she hadn't been properly briefed on it, which I think is a fairly weak argument to take if you're the one who's been put in front of the camera to argue it. But anyway, she also mentioned gender inequalities in the tax system. I just made a quick note about that. So I thought that was amusing for
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
what we know about. And for those that don't know, there was a major tax study. We talk about this stuff all the time, but there was a major tax study done in New Zealand, and it's broadly applicable elsewhere. And what they ended up finding out was that men were roughly this is New Zealand, but it's applicable in Australia, Canada, the United States, and so forth broadly. Men were about revenue neutral in the tax system, as in across their lives, if a man lived in New Zealand his entire life, he would pay into the tax system about the same amount as he was paid out to
Yeah.
educate him and care for him in his old age and so forth. Women in New Zealand were 150,000 New Zealand dollars in the red on average. As in, a woman in New Zealand costs the New Zealand tax system about $150,000 more than she was putting into tax. So And that's fairly typical. And one might wonder how a system is sustainable at all at that level. The only way it's really being sustained is through economic growth. So if economic growth were to stall, that could be quite a problem because yeah, as I said, women in New Zealand, and this is broadly applicable elsewhere, were costing the system quite a significant sum.
Mhm.
So better hope that economic growth continues. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but I did want to mention that. And I did say that I would very briefly mention demographics. I have talked about demographics before. It's a topic close to my heart. I've had an
Okay.
interest in it. I'm in my early 50s now.
Mhm.
I have had an interest in this since I was about 10 or 12. So
Ooh.
we're 40 years I've had an interest
Mhm.
in this. And when I was reading about this in the early 1980s. The sources, this wasn't the era of the internet. This was the era of the printed book, which means the sources were often 5 to 10 years old. So you were looking at sources that were early to late 1970s, and I was reading them in the early 1980s. So they would talk about things like we predict that the population growth will start to slow significantly. And then a few years later, yeah, the population growth is starting to slow significantly. Through much of my life, it was believed that, and a lot of people don't really realize this, they thought that, but for much of my life, it was believed that population of the Earth would stabilize probably somewhere around about 10 billion people, probably somewhere around about 2100. And then from that point, the population would either very slowly creep up or would remain static. The idea that it would fall was not something that was being seriously considered. The first, so the I was thinking about this as someone who's kept on top of demographic trends and so forth and what the data was saying. So I think that the first time that I heard the idea that the Earth's population would shrink would have been around about 2005, so about 20 years ago, rather. At the time, it was just a sort of a hypothesis, and they would say, well, the population might rise a little bit, or it might stay stable, or
Yeah.
it might fall, right?
Hmm.
So it wasn't they weren't saying it will fall. They're saying it's a possibility now because
Yeah.
and this is because birth rates were dropping, but of course, since then birth rates, particularly in the developing world, have started to drop much more quickly than predicted. So a
Yeah.
book was written. I don't recall the name of the book offhand. But I probably should have looked it up, but has sort of been rather flat out. But a book was written in 2010 that predicted that we might see a demographic crash. So that was
Yes.
the first time that anyone was probably seriously saying, we could actually be looking at a serious reduction in the population.
Mhm.
Now, by 2025, 15 to 20 years after that, it's now a mainstream idea. Interestingly enough, I still hear people who haven't got with the plan and still think the population is going to rise. It's not. It's very clear now we're looking for it at a demographic crash. So
Yeah.
I know I'm going quite quickly here, but this is
No.
stuff we have talked about a bit more. But there's two different problems. One, the population falls.
Hmm.
Two, the population falls too quickly. Those are different problems.
Okay.
So yeah, so the population falling too quickly, that's definitely a problem. Essentially, and I know we have talked about, I know I have covered this, so I'll summarize it quickly.
Yeah.
Essentially, when you're born, the state, you can't do anything. You can't go out to work at 2 and 3. The system provides for you. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, then you become older and you work and you pay into the system, and uh, the system then you, this and this even in a society where with small government, this is still going to be true because there are
Yeah.
things the system does. The system provides education. The socialized education is universally the case. Roads, law enforcement. There's all sorts of other things the state will always do, even in a small government world, right? For roughly the first half of your adult life, you are the productive person who you're supposed to be, in the way this is supposed to work. You pay into the system partly to offset the costs of your own education earlier. And then you get older, you retire. Now you're drawing back from the system again. Every society that's ever existed has supported its elderly. Some are informed. We tend to do ours formally. We have old age homes and all this sort of thing.
Yes.
Some are government provided, so they may be private, but the system. as in the entire economy, whether that could be so that could be government or private, is providing for you in some way, right? The way it's done here in Australia is you will invest $500,000 with the unemployed with the old age home. They will enjoy the interest benefit from that, and then once the person dies, that money is then returned to the estate. So they don't get the capital, but they get the interest benefit, and they're able to invest it over many years. Because they can calculate roughly how long someone will live based on their gender and so forth. So anyway, but some systems, some societies do it informally. The children are expected to look after their parents, but one way or another, all societies
Mhm.
support their elderly.
Yeah.
So the problem here is that as the birth rate falls, the society gets older, and the proportion of producers to consumers grows. And you have one person, whereas you might have had one person supporting one consumer before, or two, now they might have to support three or four or five. And it means that those workers have more and more pressure put on them. Now, this gets worse if they have the ability to emigrate from your society to another
Mhm.
society which is doing better. And now you've
Yeah.
got less workers, right? And right. So
Yeah.
this is where it's now widely repeated that 2.1 is break even. Um, Speaking of as someone with an interest in demographics, that was something that I know I was telling people about long, long ago, and it wasn't well known than it is now. That's the break even point at which if you have average of 2.1 children per woman, you have a stable population in society. Anything less than that, and the population will decline. A figure that used to get bandied around, and I have tried to find a source on it recently, but I haven't found one. But I still keep it in mind. A figure that used to be raised was 1.7. The saying was that if the society got below 1.7 births per woman, it was dropping too fast. And the problem is, yeah, these poor people in the middle who are trying to work to support the society have to support an ever-growing number of consumers, children,
Yeah.
and the elderly, right? And it becomes an increasing burden on them in one way or another.
Mhm.
So whether it's direct, whether it's formally or informally, it doesn't matter. So this is why having a population growth that is too low is a problem, right? Now you can offset that with immigration. You can prop it up with immigration, and why, even though my attitude, and I say this to people when they offer anti-immigration arguments, it doesn't matter whether you think immigration is a good idea or not. If your society isn't having enough children, it's pretty much the only option you've got, right?
Yeah.
Now I know Japan has experimented, and South Korea have
Oh,
experimented. They've experimented with. They don't have a lot of immigration, although I think that's changing. But they've experimented with automation to offset the problem. And my feeling, it'd be interesting to know what you think, but my feeling is that had mixed results with that. It's been partially successful, it seems, but not fully successful.
well, it sounds like one of those things like we've been talking about the AI issue. We'll probably still need some kind of human involvement to kind of keep things in check.
Yep.
But so all this seems like more, we're not solving the underlying problem. We're kind
Mm.
of mitigating some of the effects
Yes.
for a certain amount of time. But it's not going to be worth it if we don't kind of ultimately teach the values and by having children, what Rob and I mean is to have good families, of course. There's problems, I think, with some of the people kind of going just the children route without mentioning the father or something like that. But that's a bit of a
Yeah.
tangential area. But yeah,
That's right. But it
that's
is
what
tied
we're
up with concepts like
yeah
fatherlessness, for
yeah
example.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
sure.
That's
Okay,
right.
so everybody knows where we're coming from on this one, but
Yeah,
so
that's
the
right.
penny's
And
taken.
and,
Yeah.
and you've got that's right. You've got women who are having children with multiple fathers, and you've got
Mhm.
unstable relationships and
Yeah.
so forth. And yes, and this is affecting the next generation, and they're not having enough kids, or they're not having
Hmm.
stable relationships. And exactly, there's all these
Yeah.
problems. So Japan and South Korea, of course, have across the world, the birth everywhere outside Africa, essentially the birth rate is falling significantly. But South Korea and Japan both have much lower birth rates than most Western countries. And South Korea's is just comically low. I think it's down to about 0.78 births per woman or something. It's
Hmm.
it's just crazy low. Uh, South Korea is going to implode if they don't do something about this, right? If they don't
Hmm.
either start bringing in immigrants, or somehow raise the birth rate. But anyway, Japan's got a low birth rate too, but the South Korean one is just crazy.
Yeah,
But so
I don't know if Japan has the same feminist problem that South Korea's got, though. That's the thing.
that's right. South
I'm
Korea
not
has a very
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, South Korea has a very serious feminist problem. Of course, that's where the 4B started.
Hmm.
That's right,
Yep.
and that's now been
We're not forgetting about
withdrawn.
4B ever. We're
We're
never ever going
abs
to forget about 4B.
No, we exactly. So, and then there's a lot of problems tied up here, and I'm not going to say there's an easy solution to any of this, right?
Mhm.
Um, but and perhaps some of it's inevitable. I suspect some of it was inevitable, because people who are living in industrialized societies, all else being equal, do seem to have less children. Um, but that doesn't mean their numbers had to drop so low that they weren't going to even replace themselves and the population was going to implode. But anyway, so what I was getting at earlier is population dropping too fast is absolutely a problem. There's a second issue that's been raised, that population dropping. I actually am not convinced that population dropping itself is a problem. It's different, right? It's
Yeah.
very different. It's very different. But I'm not, and it might produce some different economic outputs. But I'm not convinced that slow decline of population is necessarily going to be a problem. Some people do. Some economists are arguing that any decline in population is a problem, right? I'm not convinced that slow decline is a problem. Fast decline, 100%. That's definitely an issue. But if a population was declining and halved over 1,000 years or 500 years,
Hmm.
does that really matter? I mean, Japan's got an interesting problem that houses in remote areas are essentially worthless, right? And it could be, as we said earlier, property prices in Tokyo are high, right? Real estate prices. But in some remote areas, you go to remote villages that you can essentially buy a house for next to nothing in a few cases, right? I personally know someone who has bought a house. He's Australian. I went to university with. He married a Japanese woman, moved to Japan, which, by the way, is another phenomenon we're seeing more of. Westerners. Westerners used to marry foreigners and bring them to the Western country. Now they
Yeah.
marry foreigners and move out, right?
Yeah.
So why are they doing that? Right?
Hmm.
It's because of the things we've talked about. But um, this gentleman is living in southern Japan. I won't say where exactly, but he's living in southern Japan, right?
Hmm.
Where it gets quite hot in the summer, as I now know from personal experience.
Yeah.
He has purchased a second residence in Hokkaido, which is in the far north,
Yep.
and
The cold
he's
place.
got exactly, and
Yeah.
he and his wife are going to summer in Hokkaido, and this house was purchased, I think, for a few $1,000s.
Gosh.
And yes, they're going to summer in Hokkaido. So isn't that great? Not only can, lots of people in Western countries can't buy one property, he's got two, right? And
Yeah.
that's yeah, and it's just a domestic flight to Hokkaido to
Hmm.
where to weather the summer, as it were,
Yeah.
in the cooler weather.
Well, I
Yep.
hope he has a worthwhile job, because when it comes to like foreigners kind of seeking work there, you don't get much other than English teacher for the most part. That's my
No.
understanding about it.
So I
Yeah, so
actually haven't asked him what he's been doing. Actually,
maybe
haven't
he's
asked him what
doing
area he's been working in, but
maybe he's doing some kind of Western work, telecommuting, like some
that could be true too.
that
Exactly.
could be. Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. Because that's right. There are a lot of people doing that, and in fact, Japan actually has a visa for that now. Obviously,
Hmm.
I think he could get residence anyway
Yeah.
because he's married to a Japanese citizen.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is something that people are doing. Or alternatively, there are people who are just, especially if your costs are low, you can just do part-time work, and they call it the gig economy or whatever. But and this is another point I want to make. It's something I'll be writing about in AVFM in the near future too. I
Yes.
don't think I think a lot of that people talk about, the loneliness epidemic among men. I don't think that that's true at all. I think a lot of young men
Yeah.
are quite happy with the situation they're in. I think they're
Yeah. It's a
happy with.
false framing of the problem. So
Exactly. I think they're having that. A lot of them are MGTOW. There's some who I don't necessarily call themselves MGTOW. There are some who are in relationships, but they're minimizing their costs. They're living in a relaxed lifestyle. They're marrying foreigners, moving to a country with a lower cost of living. I think and I'm not talking about this necessarily talking about this friend of mine at all, this gentleman I know from university, but I think that a lot of cases that is the case. The biggest expense a lot of Westerners have is actually their mortgage because house prices are so high.
Mm,
If and then Australia's had a lot of experience with this, but other countries are now doing it too.
yeah.
uh, but if you take away that, a lot of people's costs aren't that great, right? Especially if you're living somewhere like Japan where food costs are low, you can purchase a house cheaply, the costs of the house to maintain it are quite low, the food costs are low. Really, what else do you need? You pursue your hobbies. Maybe your hobbies are something you can generate some money out of.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah,
think this is,
exactly.
yeah, I think it's increasingly what we're seeing, particularly men doing.
And women
Where,
hate that for sure. Like Western women sure hate men pursuing their own interests.
yep.
Sorry, but
And
it's on my
and
mind. I
this
just
is
had to
this
say
is
it.
this is now this is the point that I make that a lot of men, and this is the point I'm going to be making in this article. This is something I've realized, and I've talked about it. I have talked about it at times, but really, I think a lot of Western men, the current young generation of young men, they've seen these problems. They've had them their entire lives. I mean, hell, I've had them in nearly my entire life, or I've been aware of them since I
Mhm.
was quite young, right? But they've been worse for these young guys. uh, Feminists used to talk about the backlash, but the backlash never came because that's not how men work, right? Faced with the prospect of essentially being in conflict with women, a lot of men will just disengage. And that's what's happened. That's how MGTOW really got going, I think.
Mhm.
They they've just disengaged. They just ignore them. And a lot of young men simply ignore, a lot of young Western men simply ignore Western women now.
Yeah.
And the Western women are, of course, talking about this and complaining about it, right? But in reality, they're going off and they're marrying. Now, I will say that you've got to do your homework because marrying into traditional society can come with a different set of
Oh yeah.
problems.
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
But right, but I'm all about going in with your eyes open. If you decide that, say, marrying a Filipina or marrying a Vietnamese woman, and accepting the costs of that in terms of marrying into that traditional society, as long as you go with your eyes open, I have no problem with that. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
With
Sure.
a lot of these traditional Asian societies, the man will be expected to look after the wife's parents. But if the
Mhm.
man decides that marrying a Filipina and looking after the parents isn't such a bad deal, then fine. That's
Yeah.
all good.
Mhm.
But I'm just saying that there are other challenges, but what a lot of these men are doing is simply ignoring Western women now, disengaging, and just generally not worrying about it too much. Yeah, the Western women can write about the emotional, labor that they're engaging in and so forth, and all the rest of it. It doesn't matter really because the Western men have
Right.
moved on to a large degree, and
Well,
and and
like, you'd think these women would be happy that we're mitigating all that emotional labor by not interacting with them.
exactly, isn't that what they wanted? That's right.
Yeah.
So. That's why I take a different point than some other point. In a voice for men, our position is quite a bit different than a lot of other MRAs, actually.
Yeah.
Um, uh, where I think a lot of us have a more positive view of things in the sense that I think that young men are doing okay
Yeah.
by and large. Yes, these problems can certainly affect them,
Hmm.
but I think a lot of them are actually pretty clued in on it. They're reading A Voice for Men. They're reading a lot
Hmm.
of other sites,
Yeah.
and I think they're pretty clued in and they know what's going on.
In my mind, the underlying core message of the voice of men is get out of men's way. Let us find our own
Yes.
path. Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
Get out
that's
of our
right.
way.
Exactly. Get it. Exactly. That's right. That's it. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's right. The Yeah, I often say leave men alone. That's the way I
Hmm.
often put it too. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
All right. We touched a bit on hobbies, so I kind of want to do like a late obituary for something. So I guess this could sort of serve as our absent great man of history, sort of. So, like in July, we had like a lot of people kind of passing away. So some people like we kind of know like Ozzy Osbourne, Hulk Hogan, and some others, some other actors. Rest in peace to all of them. But one thing I haven't heard really talked about except in a few circles. Because he's not what you call a celebrity figure, is Mr. Uh, Shunsaku Tamiya of the Tamiya Corporation. He didn't found the corporation, but he was part of the family and was a big figure in it. And he's
Mm.
known for so the company's models, it's like and like also motorized, battery operated things, and also RC cars. And so yeah, this is the corporation, the Tamiya Corporation, and he was
Mm.
the these are some souvenirs from Oklahoma, by the way. The Hobbytown, USA, over there actually had some that I just had to snag. I got some of this. Got that. So these are all motorized ones that battery operated. Not this one. This is just a model. I'm gonna take a couple of months working on this one because I need to get some proper paint and the cement and stuff like that. But I really wanted to build a
Nice.
Volkswagen. I've loved Volkswagen since I've watched the Herbie movies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But one of the motorized ones, I got the motor done on this one. I've held off on getting the paint stuff because I wanted to get the motor working first, and I actually need to get some of the ingredients. But this actually runs. It's like I could just hopefully I'm not waking up my wife, but so this runs. I gotta turn it off. But yeah, so yeah, this is my childhood for the most part, and I'm happy to revisit it.
That's
So,
great.
but yeah,
That's great.
yeah. But
It's important. Yeah,
yeah.
it's important to
Yeah.
do stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. But rest in peace to Mr. Tamiya, who passed away on July 22nd, is what
Oh,
what Google says. But just figured I'd bring it up. He was the guy behind, well, part of the people behind some important hobbies because constructing this kind of stuff, the act of creation is really important, especially for men. So, you know,
yeah,
find your own space to kind of take the time to put things together. Men have always been doing it since the ships and bottles days.
exactly.
So it's vulgar to consider this an ick or be against him. Women should be
Oh,
ashamed that they hate men that do this, or it turns them off or something like
and in
that.
fact,
Yeah.
that should be a good test. If a woman is doing that, that's probably a bit of a red flag, I would suggest. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
hmm
yeah.
And that's all I
Um,
got. I think you got one more thing for the end, unless you got something else.
I do have one thing very
All right.
quickly,
That's fine.
and then of
Yeah.
course I've got my usual. I've got a few, well, gosh, I had
Yeah. Yeah.
a few extra things that I'd made notes of that they can worry
This is our
schedule later.
probably our longest episode, I think.
I
So
think
yeah,
so, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
which is pretty funny because I thought it was going to start out as a short episode, but I like
Uh,
the laissez-faire aspect of
hmm
we just talk
Yeah.
until we've finished with our conversation.
Well, we're making up for lost time also. So because
Quite right.
this is a
True,
month in the
true.
making, so this is
So,
fine. We're firing in all cylinders here,
yeah.
as it were.
So I one final one.
Hmm
I've entitled this one Outback Again. So Carolina Vilga was the German tourist we talked about previously that
Yeah.
drove recklessly into the Australian outback uh, without notifying. Well, there are all sorts of things she did wrong. Without notifying anybody on her own, without the right vehicle, all sorts of things. But anyway, so interestingly enough, there's an addendum now.
hmm
Ms. Vilgar was repatriated to Germany. This will be a few weeks ago now, and we actually spent time in hospital in Germany. This is really interesting because the media said she was actually hoping to continue her travels in Australia because she's got a working holiday visa or had a working holiday visa here.
Okay.
But they actually repatriated her and she spent time in Germany, which to me tends to suggest that she wasn't as well as maybe the media had first picked up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, so I just want to reiterate, if you are traveling in the Australian outback or Death Valley or anywhere where it is remote and extremely hot, that do not underestimate the danger. That the recommendation here, and I think it's probably broadly applicable, take 10 liters of water per person per day for the
Mhm.
expected duration of your travels. And if you can't fit that much in, then you probably shouldn't be going. Um, and as I said previously, it tends to kill tourists more than Aussies here.
Mhm.
Um, Anyway, so Miss Vilga, I just sort of mentioned that there is an addendum there that she got repatriated. So I think that that's kind of interesting. That Obviously I hope she's okay, but it sounds like that she might have have suffered a bit of stress there from that. So,
Oh, sure.
yes, these remote areas are not to be underestimated. So, I've got Zoe McClellan to talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, sure. Well, before we go into that one, I'll remark that from the beginning of this episode to up to this point, the theme seems to be don't be a stupid terrorist. Always be a smart one, a very smart one. Yeah.
All right, Zoe McClellan. As of August 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in that area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to that area. Some sources believe that McClellan may have left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes, I do believe was our longest episode.
Probably, yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.